I will go ahead and kick this off here and go through a couple very only a few introductory slides. And then once we're done with those, it's going to be more demonstration style. So Jessica Jolly, who's here with me, is going to be doing a lot of demonstration on Power BI. And let's go. Let's do it. Okay. So a little bit about us. My name is Eric Clark. I am a client success associate at SWICKtech. If anyone knows what that means, please tell me. No, I'm just kidding. I help with account management, marketing, and outside sales at SWICKtech. I've been with the company for 3.5 years or something like that. Great company to work for. We love our customers. Success. Clearly, that's my title. It's part of our tagline. So it's in all that we do. We believe that your clients are our clients also. So we always want to make the client very happy in all that we do and successful. And then Jessica Jolly, who's joining me today, I'm going to read her bio off, but she is a data educator focusing on the Microsoft stack. She is MCSE certified in data analytics, which is going to be converted to a DA100 certification. She is the owner of Alt Enter LLC, and she is a Microsoft certified trainer. And we had worked with Jessica a little over a year or a year and a half ago in person, obviously pre-COVID. You had done an event with us, very similar to what we're going to do today, a very 101 surface level introduction to Power BI. And then we had parlayed that into Brain Food Academy. And we actually had about a dozen or so folks raise their hand to go deeper. And we did a deep dive training for a whole day at the SWICKtech office. So, you know, there's definitely appetite for Power BI. And Jessica, thank you for joining us today. For those that are not familiar with SWICKtech, because there's a number of people in the room, SWICKtech, we have one office. It's located in New Berlin, Wisconsin, which is just outside of Milwaukee, kind of in between Milwaukee and Madison, but much closer to Milwaukee, right off of like I-94. There's about 30 we've done. Business has not slowed as a result of COVID. We've stayed pretty steady. There's still a demand for technology and making sure businesses can operate in a remote virtual world and then coming back and going back and all of those things. But, you know, we follow entrepreneurial operating system from the book Traction from Gino Wickman. So if you think about IT in that concept, we are accountable for IT and can act as an IT department, a supplement to existing IT or a supportive kind of staff to that IT. We have a help desk located in New Berlin, Wisconsin. Obviously, we're now a little bit more dispersed as we're working remotely. This is not the SWICKtech office. This is my home office. And we also, I lost my train of thought doing this like a helicopter. But SWICKtech has been around for 16 years. And we run an expert model, so we have expertise in virtually every discipline of IT that you can think of. So we can help with like project architecture and deployment and support, et cetera. One of the areas where we're strong is DevOps, which brings us to Power BI. And for whatever reason, in doing my preparation for this presentation, as I was explaining to Jessica before we started going live here, it was really difficult to find stats about Power BI because every Google query resulted in stats in how to use Power BI, assuming that the questions we're asking were like how to see these stats or get those stats. But for the third consecutive year, Power BI has ranked #1 in the quadrant as the leader quadrant, establishing as the top platform for its completeness of vision and its ability to execute. It's had full organic adoption. Microsoft isn't trying to sell Power BI. I find this fascinating because organic adoption means that people are coming to it on their own terms, and Microsoft sellers are barely compensated for selling a license to it. So instead, they're focused on like selling Azure, Office 365, the Surface devices. And what that means for all of us is there's no salesperson, fancy presentations, or 3-year contract terms. Satya Nadella and his team envisioned a product that would sell itself. And here we are 4 years later. And clearly, they've, like I said, a lot of organic adoption, and their vision is starting to become realized. They have a whole cult-like following behind this product. And so I'll add that their greatest competitive advantage really is for Microsoft that Power BI is completely intertwined as part of the Microsoft ecosystem, Office 365. So it's a very powerful business application. But that being said, it can also be embedded and baked into Microsoft Teams, which is like the fastest growing business platform ever this year, especially. So the fact that it's riding off of that and has its own kind of following, it's no wonder that it's growing. So we've seen an increase in demand and inquiry. We've done a lot of deployments. We've stood it up. We've helped support others with it. We've done training around it. So we've been dealing with Power BI since its inception, using it ourselves also, create a lot of great dashboards for our leadership team to use inside of Teams. So it's been great. And because we are expert in it, it's my opinion that our expert folks that can do this stuff on like our DevOps team aren't as eloquent at speaking about it as Jessica is. They'll go real deep and they'll speak beep bop boop to you, but Jessica can really like bring it to life. So I'm happy to have you kind of take the floor here, Jessica, and go through the demonstration of it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm just going to do a quick sound check, make sure everybody can hear me. Eric, am I coming through loud and clear?
Yep, I can hear you
Great,
very well.
perfect. Okay, so guys, that's a little bit about me and SWICKtech. By the way, I love that company photo of SWICKtech. That photo is hilarious. But what I'd like to do is ask Ryan or Eric to initiate. We're going to ask you 2 questions. Don't worry, it's anonymous. To kind of get a feel for where you guys are in your Power BI journey. So we won't know who answered what. So again, don't be afraid to answer honestly. We're just using this to sort of get a read for the audience and so that I can understand like, okay, this is what people are really interested in and so on. So go ahead and take 1 second to fill out that form. And then we will start to get answers back in chat. Okay, I love this part. This is so fun, just watching all of this coming in. Overall understanding, okay, good. Ideas about how to implement, good. Okay, we're about half and half on that. Okay, ooh, we got 100%. It started learning this, okay. That was 4 people. Okay, anybody else? Don't be shy to respond. It'll just help me in terms of, oh, we got 1 who's proficient, yay. Okay, so when I get stuck, I'm gonna ask you, whoever you are. Good thing it's anonymous, right? I can't draft you. Okay, I think we've got a sense of this and in terms of how this is leaning. So overall, people want to understand what Power BI is. And in terms of what people know, everybody's kind of dipped their toe in the water. There's one person who's saying that he or she is more than dipped their toe in the water. So that's awesome. I applaud you. Okay, great. This is perfect. This is kind of exactly where I thought everybody would be. So let's get started. All right, I am going to share my screen now. So forgive me while I do all those logistics to start sharing my screen, and hopefully it will go seamlessly. All right, Eric or Ryan, can you confirm that you are actually seeing my... Oh, thank you. Look at him. He's so on the ball. He's like, got it. Okay, so just to remind everybody, if you need any reminding, as to where we are right now in most organizations. Right now in most organizations, when you want to analyze data, whether it's financial or project-based or quality data or any type of data that you might have, your go-to tool is going to be Excel. So here I'm using a fake set of data. So again, no business was harmed in the creation of this data. This is all completely fake. And I've mimicked a situation that you might find yourself in. So you can see on my screen, and let me try to actually zoom in on it. Hold on a second. It doesn't matter what the names are, but I just want to make sure you can see. I have a bunch of Excel files, and each of these Excel files has some information related to the financial picture of this particular fake company, which sells flooring products. Okay, so again, we're in Excel right now. We're not going to stay here very long. Don't worry. I know that you already know how to use Excel, but I wanted to kind of establish us from where we are. And hold on, that's not where I want it to be. I wanted to go to Excel next. Hang on a second. There we go. All right. So now you should be seeing an Excel screen. And what you're looking at here, and again, don't worry or get caught up in what the data says. That's not important at all. But conceptually, what I want you to be thinking about as you work with your data, probably doing is some variant of getting all of the data into one place. So in this case, you can see, and I'll zoom in just so you can see it a little better. I've got the data for this particular company. Woo, sorry about that. I just made you dizzy here. This particular company, and you can see I've got the account type in here, and I've got, this is a general ledger entry, so that's what that column represents. And then this column represents the product family, and this column represents the product segment. Now, again, don't worry particularly about what each one of those is in real life, because it isn't anything in real life. It's fake. But what I want you to notice is that I am using a very typical tool within Excel to bring all the data together, which is a Vlookup. So if I come into this particular column here, this product family column, and I zoom in, you can see that I'm using a Vlookup here, okay? And I'm also using a Vlookup over here because all of the data lives in different places. And that's a big, I'm not going to say it's a problem because that is not the right word here. That is a challenge that we have, is that, you know, we're trying to gather all of our data up from lots of different sources. Maybe it's coming from databases that you have. Maybe it's coming from transaction systems you have. I'm simplifying it here for the purposes of giving a talk in an hour, but you have to pull all your data together. Once you've pulled it all together, if you're in Excel, you're probably doing something like making a pivot table. You're also probably doing pivot charts. Maybe you're even taking all those charts and putting them on a single page, and then that's kind of a dashboard for your organization. And believe me, for years and years and years, that has been state of the art. And there are still places where that technology and using pivot charts is irreplaceable. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with doing this. However, Power BI offers you another option that I want to explore today. And I just want to stop, and Eric and
Yep,
Ryan,
I'm here.
can you keep me honest? If you see anything in the chat that people have questions about, please call my attention to it. And then if you guys have a question, feel free to come off mute. I really prefer things to be done informally. That's when I'm attending one of these things, I have no problem stopping a speaker and asking them questions. So please feel free to do that.
No questions yet.
Okay. All right, we'll keep going. But again, like I said, I really mean it. Let's keep it interactive. Okay, so Excel is where we've been. Excel is still an excellent tool. There are some things Excel does better than anything else, but I'm here today to talk to you about Power BI. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this Excel screen here, and I'm going to take you to a Power BI report. Now, first of all, I'm going to tell you guys, I have zero, count them, zero. You've got a great big zero in the camera here, design skills. So do not judge me on my design skills. If you Google Power designs, you see some really beautiful works of art out there. I am not the person who could create that. And that really wasn't my purpose today. My purpose is really to give you a feeling for the functionality. So again, yes, it's probably ugly. Yes, it probably could be improved, but I'm not going to worry about that piece. I want to focus on what you can do with the tool. Okay, so we're looking at a Power BI report that I've already created so that you don't have to create it from scratch. I want you to be able to see what it's possible to do. So notice down here, go ahead. Was there a question? Nope. Okay, I'll keep going. Thought I heard a break in there. So down here at the bottom of my screen, and I'm going to zoom so you can see it, I have tabs down here. Okay, see, I've got these tabs, and that should remind you of Excel because that is very similar to the way Excel functions. Okay, and I'm on my first tab here. So think of a tab as a page. And what I've done is I've put I've put 3 slicers on this page. So this first one right here, this product family, allows me to slice on the product family that I want to look at. Okay, so these are just names of these flooring products. Believe me, it's all made up. And so I can click on durable here. And now notice that the card, the values over here on the right-hand side immediately changed, okay, when I made a selection in the slicer. Also notice that up here at the top, the description that is provided for the product line changes as I make a selection. So I'll go ahead and make another selection. Description changes. Also notice that down here at the bottom, in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see another slicer here. And a slicer is just a filter. You've probably used them in Excel. If you haven't, I strongly encourage you to check them out because they are in Excel as of Excel 2013, I believe. They're amazing. They're just filters, but they're more visually friendly filters. So in this case, what I've got is I've chosen the Color Bright product line. And the PowerBI product line comes in a couple of different options. So again, pretend that this is a real product and it comes in 12 millimeter, 18 millimeter, 8 millimeter, or custom. Don't ask me what those things mean, but I'll go ahead and I'll unselect all of them and I'll just look at 18 millimeter. And now what you'll see is that the value should change over here on the card. Okay, if I choose 8 millimeter, the values change. And if I choose 12 millimeter, the values change. So again, what I'm doing here is I am getting some data in Power BI, and I am building a report that allows me to slice and dice that data. And I'll kind of go into the little mystery behind it a little bit in a minute. But before I do that, I also want you to see one more slicer that's on this page where this one right down here, so this a slicer visual right here that I'm hovering over. You can see it because I can move it around here. And if I slide the slider, I can change the dates that I'm actually looking at. So again, all of this is coming from data that's inside the data that I've imported. Okay, so again, it's all inside this data, and what I'm able to do in Power BI, and I'll explain a little bit more about how in a minute, I'm able to build a report page that gives me slices or segments of that data so that I can display data in different ways. Okay, so that's the first one. I'm just going to go ahead and clear all these just so we go back to all of them. Hang on, let me get back to normal here. And I'm going to stop right here and see if there's any questions. Anybody have any questions so far? Anybody? Select all, and that'll bring back all my products. Okay, I'm going to keep moving because we only have an hour and I want to make sure that I cover some of these key topics here. The next page I'm going to go to is profit analysis. And yes, there's a lot of visuals on this page, but what I want you to focus on this page is the interaction between the visuals. So it isn't so much the visuals themselves as it is the interaction that happens when I make a selection on a visual. So here you'll see I've got 6 visuals total. So I've got the product and profit, the profit by product family. I've got the profit by product segment, and I've got the profit by product footprint. And each one of these, segment, family, and footprint, just describe this mythical flooring product that we make. Okay, and then down here, I have a visual that explains the breakdown of how the profit is arrived at in product family, or how the profit is arrived at in product segment. So you'll see that they all total to the same initially before I've made any selections. Notice that they all total to 310 million over here in the blue bar on the bottom scale here. But what happens when I start making selections? That's what I want you to focus on here. I'm going to look at our product family called Smart Look. Okay, and I'm going to click on that. And what's going to happen is every other visual on the page is going to change, and it's going to show me how the profit is broken out by the family, just the family Smart Look, and the segments that exist inside of that family. So if I look down here, this one makes sense, right? This says it's 281 million for Smart Look, and it's all green. Okay, this is my total for Smart Look, and this is my total all in. And because I filtered it, okay, I'm going to have the same number on both sides here. But if I come over to the middle one here, product segment, I still have the same total of 281 million. So that has not changed. But now I can see how that profit is created. What are the building blocks from the segment description that build it? And let me zoom in here so you can kind of see. If I hover over each one of these visuals, I will see something called a tooltip right here. And it will tell me this is the mid-range segment, and this is the profit that it is contributing to the overall 281 million. This one, if I hover over it, this is the premium segment. And if you look over here, you'll see that it's breaking it down visually here as well. So I can kind of see it in two different ways. So the key that I want to land here is not so much these are fabulous visuals, not so much that these are the only visuals you should use, but more I want you to realize that what this is giving you the power to do is see the connections between your data. So if you have only ever in Excel been able to look at, let's say, operating expenses or profit margins for particular products or expense centers or whatever it is, whatever the division is, with Power BI, very quickly you can create data models, which I'll talk about in a second, that allow you to see the relationships between these things. And that's what this is showing you, is the interconnectivity in the different, between the family, the segment, and the footprint, and how each one of those contributes to the profit of a total of 310 million. So I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to see, are there any questions in the chat or anywhere?
Nothing yet.
Okay,
if anybody has a question,
okay.
Go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like.
Definitely, because I'm going fast because we don't have much time together. So if you need me to repeat a concept or anything, I'm happy to do it. All right, so on this page, all I wanted to highlight is interactivity. And what I want to do now is I want to show you what powers that interactivity, what allows you to create visuals on report pages that interact with each other. And that is coming from something called the data model. So the data model, I want you to think of it as a structure, okay? If you want to think about it as a house, the frame of a house. And inside are multiple rooms, each of which connects to another room. So if you want to think about it that way, that's fine. Whatever analogy works for you. The data model is how you put together each of the tables that you bring into Power BI. So table is database speak. So maybe if you're an Excel user, you want to translate that to worksheets. Okay, so each worksheet. So you could think of each one of these little boxes on this screen as being a worksheet that I brought in from Excel. Okay, and they all are connected together via what's called a relationship. And relationships are between two fields in two different tables or worksheets that are the same thing. So for example, let me go back to my Excel really quickly, because this is where that VLOOKUP analogy becomes very useful. If you're comfortable and familiar with VLOOKUPs, which I assume a lot of you probably are, a VLOOKUP is the way that you in Excel create a relationship between one worksheet and another worksheet. The difference being that in a VLOOKUP, I have to pull the data back into the worksheet. So if you look at my column here, product family, I had to use a VLOOKUP to go get that piece of data from another worksheet and bring it into this one so that I could put it into a pivot table. Okay, that's, if you've ever done VLOOKUPs in Excel, that is essentially what a relationship is. There are more, there's more complexity to it for sure, but that's how I want you to initially think about it if you're just starting out on your Power BI journey. Now, each one of these tables that has DIM in front of it, okay, and this is just a naming convention. You don't have to name a table DIM. That's not necessary, but it is a naming convention that people use. DIM is short for dimension. So each of these tables represents a description for something called a fact. So a fact is something that is recorded on a regular basis. So if you're a store, it's going to be your sales maybe. If you are a quality analysis, a QA department, it's going to be the quality test results you run. If you are a trucking company, it's going to be, you know, the trucking runs that are performed. It is essentially a list of transactions. So that's what's called a fact table. And in a fact table is always going to be the centerpiece of a model. So it's always going to sort of sit virtually in the center. It doesn't actually sit in the center per se, but visualizing it, it'll sit virtually in the center of your model. And the tables that have the information that describe the facts will sit around it and will be connected via relationships. Now, why am I making a big deal about data models, and why am I spending a minute here talking about data models? The reason I'm doing that is that when you first start on Power BI, one of the barriers to entry that I've seen is that you do need to have a basic grasp of data modeling. You don't have to be a data modeling expert, but 99% of the time when you have a problem with a visual, the problem is coming from your data model. So it behooves everybody who is getting started to be aware, number one, of data modeling, and number two, to put a little bit of effort into it to make sure you understand the fundamentals at the very minimum, because that's what powers all of this goodness here. So if we come back here and we look at this interactivity, all of this interactivity that I'm demonstrating here by clicking is coming from those relationships between the different fields, okay? If I destroy those relationships or I don't have them, I can click all day long and I will not get a result that is correct here. So again, relationships are the core and the foundation of all of the interactivity that you see and that is really beneficial in Power BI, which is why I'm kind of hitting on them early on here. All right, any questions on that? Okay, I'm gonna keep moving here. We're moving along here. I want to just get caught up in my notes here. All right. Another cool way that you can use Power BI to show your data, which is not easily doable in Excel. It is doable, but it's not easily doable, is you can show it by geography. So in this case, I have a map of the United States. If I zoom out, I actually have a map of the world here, but I have a map of the United States. And if I hover over any one of these bubbles, those represent a city that's in my data. So each channel has a city associated with it. Remember, this is completely fake data, so it's just whatever, it's arbitrary. So there are cities in this data. And what I've done is I've said, okay, I want each one of these cities to be graphed on here or mapped, and I want the size of the bubble to be indicative of how expensive that channel or that city. So maybe think of it as a flooring distribution and showroom. Okay, again, this is all fake data, so you can imagine whatever you want. But this is the size of the bubble indicates expenses. So how expensive is that? So the one that's sitting over here, and I've forgotten, I think it might be New York City, I can't remember, is the most expensive. And have over here, so I think this is San Diego and so on. So that's the first piece, is that I can geographically map data very easily. I can either do it by having city names or state names or country names, even better, having latitude and longitude. So those are even better options for mapping. But you may have also noticed that what I'm doing as I hover over is I'm adding some additional information here. So this graph that you're seeing is showing me the top 5 product lines that are profitable in that particular city. So, and it is filtering, so it's adjusting as I hover over different cities, you will see different product lines there. So in this one, I got Max and then RST8 and then BM and RST, whatever those are. Okay, again, all fake, so it doesn't matter. But if I hover down here on Atlanta, you'll see that I get a different set of products here. So once again, this is that interactivity that makes Power BI so powerful. And it's powered by relationships and the data model. So everything you're seeing here is dependent on having a robust data model from the beginning. So again, that's how it's doing its magic there. All right, we are at 3:30. So what I'd like to do now is transition us into talking about the Power BI ecosystem. So that was a little bit of show and tell. But what I'd like to do now is show you the Power BI ecosystem overall, since several of you are interested in that. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that up to the screen. And this is a visual I created a couple years ago, and it needs a little updating, but it's actually still fairly relevant. So Power BI is not one thing. It's not just the Power BI desktop. It's actually a bunch of tools that work together. So the first tool that people usually get exposed to is Power BI Desktop. That's what I'm showing you right now. That's what you're seeing is my Power BI Desktop. That is a free tool. Anybody can download it. Anybody can use it. Here's the kicker. You can't share very easily from the using, let me say, you can't share very easily at an organizational scale using just the Power BI Desktop. So the Power BI Desktop is usually the first thing people do because it's free and they can try it and they download it, and that's great. It updates relatively frequently, probably once every 2 months or so, and it is used to create reports, which is what you're looking at right now. You're looking at a report that I created. Now I happen to also be using the report page to show you some graphics. Because I didn't want to switch back to PowerPoint. But in any case, I have a report here. It's got multiple pages. You can see at the bottom. And that's what the Power BI Desktop is for. The Power BI Desktop also is a tool where you can create your data models. There are other tools out there and more tools every day. But for most of us, at least when we're starting, the place we're going to create our data models is in the desktop. So that's the first touch point. Then what I've got over here on the left-hand side is your data sources. Now, obviously, I've only excerpted 4 of them. There are, I don't even know how many. At last count, I think north of 200 data sources that you can pull from. So Power BI is constantly creating new connectors to different data sources. So I would seriously doubt that there's a mainstream data source that you cannot connect to with Power BI now. So you connect to the data source here you initiate it from your desktop, your Power BI desktop. You open up Power BI desktop just like any other Microsoft tool, and you go and you you pull in a new set of data. Then once you've got that data from wherever you get it from, you are probably going to need to alter that data. You're probably going to do what's called transforming the data. And you're going to use Power Query Editor for that. So the Power Query Editor, which is indicated here in the green box, is a separate tool, but it's baked into the Power BI Desktop. Okay, so it's part and parcel of the Power BI Desktop. You can't launch Power Query Editor without going through either the Power BI Desktop, or it's also available in Excel 2016. So that's a whole different brain food topic for another day. But in any case, Power Query Editor is where you're going to make the transformations in your data that you need to do to make it fit for your data model. Because remember, if you're pulling data from somewhere else, that data may come in and it may have too much stuff in there. It may not have everything you need in there. So you're going to possibly need to shape it into a shape that can then be easily put into a data model. Because remember, the data model is the structure that everything's going to fit into. And typically when you're doing a report, you're going back and forth between the editor and the desktop. I always tell people when I'm training them, just keep the Power Query Editor open, because you're going to be going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. You do a lot of shaping of your data. Okay, so before I move on to the next piece, any questions on that? Anybody?
Still no questions.
Okay, all right.
I do want to point out that you're in Eastern time, though, and a lot of us might be in Central time.
Yeah.
Not that that's super relevant, but I know you had said 3:30 a little bit ago.
Oh,
And I was,
sorry,
wait a
sorry,
second,
my
it's
bad.
2:30,
Yes.
but just
Thank
making
you.
that note.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry if I gave anybody a heart attack. No, no, you didn't just lose an hour of your day. Sorry, I'm out in Maine, on Western Maine. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So now the next piece of this is when you've finished your report, where are you going to put it? So unlike an Excel file or unlike a Word file, Power BI is really designed to be shared through a service. And so they designed the Power BI service to be a place where you can publish your reports. So I can show you very quickly how I can come into this report right here and publish it right into my service. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my home tab up here. So I'm just on my home. I don't want anybody to be, confused about where I am. I'm just on the home ribbon here. And I'm going to come all the way over here to the right-hand side, and I'm going to click on Publish. Okay. And this is part of the workflow that you would follow in a normal organization. So I would publish this report, and it says, do you want to save your changes? Yes, I do. What it's going to do is it's going to make a connection with my Power BI service, which is under my account. So again, this is something that you get set up as part of your Microsoft Office 365 arena. Okay. And then you'll see here, and let me zoom in on this, you'll see that I have multiple workspaces that I could choose from here. Okay. I don't care what I'm going to put it in. Let's see. Hold on. I'll zoom back in so I can pick one. And I'll put it in this one right down here. So again, think of a workspace as a folder, if you will, where people can BI reports that are created in the desktop. They can also create dashboards out of those reports, and they can share data sets as well. So a workspace is a place for you to collaborate with Power BI specific type of content. It's almost like a team, but it's a little confusing because Teams is now working with Power BI as well. So I don't want to get too far down that road or we'll all get tangled up there. But think of Power BI Workspace in the service as being a place where you're going to publish your reports and share them with other members of that workspace. Now it's publishing it right now. So while it's publishing it, I'll move that box to the side and I'll show you this Power BI service graphic here of workspaces. You've got my workspace, which is just for you. It's not accessible to other people. You can share reports out of it, but again, it is absolutely not best practice. It's great if you're just experimenting, but if you're trying to go live with this tool, that is absolutely not the way to go. So think of my workspace as being a sandbox just for you. And then the workspace, which, by the way, used to be called the app workspace. That's why I still have it labeled that way. But you will just see it called workspace, is where you can put your content that you're sharing with other people. So if I worked at SWICKtech and Ryan and Eric and I were working together, we could be members in a workspace, and I could publish this report up to that workspace, and they would have access to this report. Not only that, they could have access to the underlying data in the report. So again, it's a place to share. The final piece of this is what's called an app. So an app is a place where your workspace can share curated content. So your workspace owner, so think of it as being the folder owner or whoever's in charge of the workspace, can decide, okay, you know what, this month we're going to publish this report and this dashboard. And those can then get published on an app that can be distributed more widely across the organization. I like to think of the Workspace app as being almost like a magazine that comes out with, maybe it comes out weekly, maybe it comes out monthly, maybe it comes out daily, but it comes out with content that the owners, the members of the workspace have decided and the owner has published from the workspace. So it's a publication mechanism more than it is anything else. Okay, it's finished publishing, so that's good. I'm just going to switch very quickly now over to my service so you can see that really quickly, and then we'll switch back. So this is my service. It's a browser, so you're looking at a Google browser here. You can obviously use Edge, you can use Firefox, whatever. I just happen to be using Chrome. You don't, it's browser agnostic basically. And over here on the left-hand side, you see a menu of different options. I have a place to put favorites. So if there are reports that I get that I want to favorite because I want to go back to them over and over again, I can do that. I can look at things that I've looked at recently. I can look at apps that I am a member of. So I can look at the different apps and think of these again, almost like magazines on a newsstand. I can look at just straight up files that were shared with me directly. And then finally, right down here, and again, let me zoom in on this so you can see this a little better. I've got this Workspaces area. So you can see that it's divided into two types of workspace. My workspace right down here, which I said is the sandbox, and then Workspaces, which is where you will publish your work. So I took that report that I had created and I published it into, I picked this one right here. I picked Workspace Webinar New. Okay, so if I go into that one, now I'll see everything that I published. And notice right down here at the bottom, okay, I've got those two. And notice that what is published here is the report. So if you look over here, it says report, but it also publishes the data set. Okay, so that's a really important thing to think about as well. And I'll get into that in 1 second here. All right, so that's the service. So that's a total whirlwind tour. You've seen, let me go back to the Power BI report here. You've seen desktop, because that's what I'm in right this minute. You have not seen the Power Query Editor because we don't have time to get into that in that depth, but it is a separate tool that I can launch from the Power BI desktop. And then you've seen the service as well. So these are the three components, major building blocks for Power BI. Okay, I want to quickly keep moving because I know we're at 2:44 Central Time, 3:44 Eastern. I'm just going to again use the tabs down here at the bottom. I'm using Power BI almost like a PowerPoint deck, but normally, obviously, this is not necessarily how you'd want to use Power BI. I just don't want to switch back and forth. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to talk a little bit about barriers that you may encounter. Every organization is different. Every organization has different problems that they need to address. So first of all, tech. One thing that I find is really severely overlooked is Power BI really does, to create reports with big, robust data models, it requires a machine with some heft. So for example, for me, I have a 64-bit machine. I think I goosed it up to the max of the RAM that it can have. I've forgotten what that is. It has the latest processor. So I have started mentioning this because I've seen a lot of people struggle if they're using just a basic laptop, maybe 32-bit. It can get a little tough in terms of responsiveness once you get into the bigger models. So just want to put that out there to think about. Dirty data is probably the worst. Is you're gonna find that the data that you've got spread across your organization, as you surface it out there and you start looking at it, you're going to find that you have inconsistencies, you have anomalies, you have differences between the way it's reported. So you're going to have a lot of reconciliation to do over time. I mean, it's not going to be a barrier for starting, but it is a work that you're going to have to keep on doing over time. It'll probably take you several years to get that data clean enough to where you can just download it and it's good to go. And that also speaks to the issue of stewardship, which I'll get into in a minute. Habit is another thing that's going to be a big barrier. Most people, when you give them a deadline, they're going to go to the tool that they know. They're going to go to the tool that they trust. And guess what? That's probably 99% of the time, that's Excel. So you're going to need to be aware that it's going to be a learning curve and that it's going to take some time before people start feeling like they have the skill sets to quickly, whip something up in Power BI like they have in Excel. And then time, it's going to take time because you're going to need to train people, and the training and the learning curve is going to be the biggest piece of the time, and also the dirty data journey. So those are just some barriers there. There are some excellent YouTube broadcasts. Look up, Matthew Roche, R-O-C-H-E, and he has done, I'm going to put it in the chat, he has done a phenomenal job talking about building a data culture. So I would definitely Google him. He's done a really, really amazing job with that. He's a Microsoft employee, and as I said, it's just, he's got a lot to say, and it's worth hearing. Okay, rollout plan. I think I want to do rollout considerations first, and then I will land with rollout plan. Okay, so rollout considerations that you need to think about, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. This is just the ones that I could think of right off the top of my head that you need to think about. The first big bucket is data. Where is it? Who has access to it? Are you going to have to, what are you going to have to do to make sure that the people who need to analyze the data can get access to the data? How are you going to structure that access? Maybe you're going to have to talk to the database administrators and figure out what kinds of access. Maybe there needs to be new types of permissions. It'll to sort of identify your data sources, where they are, where they live, who owns them, how valid they are. And that leads to the next consideration, which is what I call curation. So this ties back to that dirty data, and it also ties back to who has the data set that is the most accurate. So you'll hear a lot about, having sort of the golden data set, the one that is accurate, that reports everything exactly the way the organization wants it reported. You will probably have a journey to take to get to that point. And along that way, you will need people or a person or a committee or whoever to look at the data and decide, okay, this data needs to be cleaned up. This data is garbage. This data is fit for purpose. All of that kind of stuff. Because what's going to happen when you start using Power BI is you're going to start surfacing questions. And people are going to say, well, wait a minute, why is it reporting it that way? That's not right. So be prepared for that piece of the journey, because it will definitely happen and it will last a while. Training. So obviously this is what I know best, because this is how I make my living. People need to be trained on Power BI and the Power Query Editor. These are not, while they are Excel adjacent, these do involve new concepts that most people, even if they're whiz bang with Excel, have not used before. That's one of the reasons that in that tiny little demonstration I did, I talked a lot about data modeling, because that's a big hurdle. It's an intellectual concept that anybody who's going to write a report needs to be aware of before they embark on that journey. Because otherwise they'll create visuals that won't work, or maybe they work and they're wrong. So again, it's one of those things that it does require training. And then the other piece of that is data literacy. So making sure that, first of all, that when I use a particular term, for example, let's just say profit, I am calculating profit exactly the same way that you in a different group in a different part of the organization are calculating it. So that is another thing that will become very visible very quickly as you start creating Power BI reports based on data sets. If I go in and present some numbers and I say, well, this is what I'm showing as profit, and you go in and you present and you show a different number, that's going to very quickly surface the fact that we're not measuring profit the same way. So data literacy and data awareness are a huge part of that journey. And again, going to Matthew Roach's, watching his stuff on YouTube will really help set that, frame that up for you in your head there. And finally, technologies. So licensing, which I'll get into in a minute. I'm not going to talk dollars and cents, obviously, because I don't sell the stuff. So, but I will talk generically about licensing. Integration with Office 365 is a huge piece of the Power BI puzzle now. I think if you were at the very beginning of the call, Eric mentioned that it integrates with Teams. It is integrated almost completely up and down the Microsoft stack. So it integrates with Dynamics, it integrates with Teams, it integrates with Outlook, it integrates with a SharePoint. So again, it has a lot of touch points. So that'll be something that you need to decide is how are you going to position it in terms of anything else in the Office 365 environment or in SharePoint or Azure if you've got Azure. And finally, I'm just again going to mention workstations. Don't neglect those just because, again, you will have some frustrated users. Make sure that you evaluate what kind of equipment people are using to try to do this work, because it can be very frustrating if you don't have the right machine for the job. All right, I'm going to go to my last slide because we're rolling into the corner here. And oh, yes.
There's one question, but it was about if it's available later. And just so anyone that might be wondering as we get towards the end here, absolutely yes, this will be on demand and we'll share that with everybody via email tomorrow.
Yes, I hope so, because I do that too. I sign up for things and then I have to watch it later on or whatever. So I hope that's great. All right, so this is my last slide. And I just positioned this here to give you a sense of the direction that you need to take. This is by no means prescriptive, okay? You have to work with your supplier, whoever that might be, to talk about your rollout plan. But what I want to emphasize is you'll hear a lot about people talking about Power BI free licenses. Yep, if you are just having each individual person play with it and investigate it, sure, that works. The minute you need to start sharing data and sharing reports, no can do. So I go in and I train a lot in organizations where people say, well, most people are just gonna have the Power BI free licenses and just a few people are gonna have the pro licenses. No, just no. It just isn't gonna work the way it's designed to work. So I like to put that right out there. So if you're going into a pilot, meaning you have a bunch of, maybe 10 users, 20 users, whatever it is, who are going to investigate it, one way you could go is go with the Power BI Pro license, which is an add-on, with your E3 license. So yeah, that's an Office 365 SKU. I won't go into great detail because SWICKtech can certainly answer those questions. But if you have an E3 license for Office 365, you can layer Power BI Pro on top of that. And of course, you can get a trial license for like 8 weeks. I think they give you a trial license for 8 weeks. But typically, you want to plan that each person who's going to be touching Power BI has a license, okay? Now, the next step up would be giving people a combination of E5, which is yet again another SKU of license, and we don't need to go into details, but the important thing you need to know is E5 includes Power BI Pro. It includes it, so you don't pay more for the E5. You don't have to pay an additional cost. Or E3 with Pro license. So again, you can do a limited or a full rollout with a combination of those two license types. You don't have to have E5. Everybody could have E3 with Pro, or everybody could have E5. So you can mix it up. And then finally, for large organizations, there is something called premium, and I say large organizations because I know this one, it retails at $5,000 a month. So it is only for really large organizations. So, but if you're going to do an E3 license, a full rollout, you need to be at E3 and Pro or E5 for every user that's going to use Power BI. You need to budget for that and plan for that. All right, we are at 2:56. Eric, I promised that I would end on this slide and give you just a few minutes to wrap it up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm happy to stay on to answer questions.
Cool. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I have one final slide on my end. Just so everyone is aware of like how SWICKtech intertwines with this, and is looking to design a database for report data, create an Azure tenant subscription and setup. We can do that in like the standard Azure. We also are able to do that through Azure Gov for some of the organizations that we work with that do work with like the DOT and ITAR compliances and NIST and all of those things. We can also create an Azure infrastructure for database, web form, PowerBI. Everything you see on the screen here that I'm reading off is something that SWICKtech can do to help. It depending on kind of where you're coming at this from. And we would just encourage a conversation. If you would like to learn more or identify how we can help or learn where you're at, etc., just reach out and let us know. There are going to be 2 different emails that are going to come out to everybody that attended today. For everyone that registered, you're going to see an email that will come through with this presentation on demand. So with anything that you want to like watch in greater detail or replay, you can do that. And then we're also going to send out our Net Promoter Score survey to ask how did we do. So please feel free to submit your feedback when you see that stuff come through tomorrow. And as we wrap up, are there any questions at all for Jessica? She covered a ton of information. She went through it quickly and proficiently. So, seriously, if there's any questions, please don't hesitate.
Yeah, and definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I know one of you has already done that, so that's awesome. The Power BI community is very welcoming, very open, and so we strongly support each other, and we love to make people welcome and feel good about being part of learning how to do Power BI. So please reach out to me. I have no problem with that.
Cool. Well, I don't see any questions, just a lot of praise. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, Jessica, for
No problem. I do see a question. I think it was from Mira. Hold on. Mira. So great question, Mira. Actually, I love this question because I started out using Pro with E3. So one of the things that I do is that I never, ever use anything free if I'm going to run my business on it, because what Microsoft can give, Microsoft can take away as well. So I started out using Pro with an E3 license, and then I did E5 because I wanted to see what some of the other capabilities were. And now I'm going to be trialing the premium per user, which is just still in trial. But for yourself, I would start out with your free license. If you're truly an individual, start out with a free license. If you're within an organization, though, and you're looking at trying to make sure that this is going to be fit for purpose for your organization, just know that you will want to upgrade to E3 with Pro pretty quickly to get it off the ground. But for someone just starting out, try the Power BI free license and start playing with it, especially if it's just you individually.
Thanks for asking that question. I think that was the first question we've seen, so I'm glad that we have one.
Right? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure, really a pleasure. And connect with me on LinkedIn. Love to keep the dialogue going.